It's Sunday, October 8, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to The Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is a Democratic political commentator and New York City-based public interest attorney, Kaivan Shroff. Welcome back to The Weekend Show.
Great to be back.
We had a very interesting conversation last time, and I was kind of looking forward to kind of getting your views on how, because the polls are so crazy, we never know who to believe. And there was a poll a couple of weeks ago that actually put Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden in national polling. It was an ABC News and Washington Post poll. And I'm sure that, there will be more polls to come that will completely reverse that. As you know, polling is one of those things that provides us with some data to talk about, but it often bears very little resemblance to the results of elections. So I just want to talk about how, this kind of swing back and forth and how it seems possible to me, I don't quite understand it, maybe you do, that despite Donald Trump's criminality, his indictments, the 91 charges, possibly more, that as well as all of the fascistic behavior, the effectively far-right and extremist rhetoric, that people still put him as their kind of de facto choice for a Republican vote when Joe Biden has done really rather well recently.
Well, I think it's two things. First of all, it is the behavior of a cult. So I think there are some committed Republicans that no matter what Trump does, and maybe in fact, because of some of the things Trump does, defying the law, are going to commit to him forever. But part two, I think, the media certainly plays a role here. The reality is the polling industry itself has been in crisis for the better part of a decade at this point. They clearly botched 2016. They got their numbers wrong in 2020 when Biden won by more than expected. And then they predicted that massive red wave in 2022. And we're way, way off. A big part of that being because young voters, my cohort, showed up to deliver for Democrats. And they're underpolling people like me because I have a cell phone. Of course, I don't have a landline. Most Americans at this point don't. But, it's very easy to block random callers or, those types of new things that happen with digital advancement. I think the other piece of it, the poll you mentioned, if I have the right one, also had Trump ahead 20 points of Biden with young voters. So I think really have to question what's a poll that can be dissected or one angle taken as a soundbite to write an article that gets some clickbait online and goes around for a day, and polling that's actually useful and helpful and informs us of what we might need to do over the next year to win that election.
And some polls have a political leaning, don't they? So, Rasmussen famously kind of leans Republican in some ways. But Nate Silver, who runs 538, which, for journalists is often referred to and is used because he puts a lot of the data on screen. You can analyze it your own way. I mean, he has been wide of the mark on so many of the results recently, hasn't he? So, I mean, maybe we just need to forget polling altogether.
I think there is some value to it for campaigns that need to check on certain issues, topics. But absolutely, first of all, there's push polling, which I think is what you're referencing, where you kind of ask these questions in a way where you're sort of prompting the answer of who you're asking. But then there's number two, this idea that if you just keep asking people, do you think the president's too old? Do you think the president's too old? Every week you're calling them for a new poll on that. Yeah, eventually they might have that narrative in the back of their head. So that's a huge issue. I think, though, you have to think of polling as it's kind of like checking your watch in the final hour when you have something to deliver. Like if you're in an emergency, you don't want to keep saying, oh, let me check in, I'm running out of time. You just need to go do the work and do the best job you can. I mean, I don't think it's an open question what Democrats need to be doing to win this election. And I think we just saw it last week with Biden's speech defending democracy and criticizing authoritarians, right? That is a central pillar of this campaign. There's no polling that I think should inform or change what Biden's doing in that regard. He's doing the right thing. Same thing with young voters. We don't need to poll to know that young voters are showing up, but they need Democrats to show that they're willing to fight when they are elected. And we've seen that too. So a lot of examples like that.
Let's talk about that speech, because I think it would be remiss of us not to focus on some of the language that President Joe Biden used. He launched a wide-ranging attack on Donald Trump. This was in Arizona. He warned that his predecessor is a threat to American democracy. He drew a sharp distinction between himself and Trump, and it was probably the most extensive critique of Donald Trump this year. This was at an event to honor the late Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona, former presidential candidate, fighter pilot, Vietnam prisoner of war, who Trump had denounced as not a war hero. And we remember all of that stuff, He's getting caught. He said, well,
renaming the ship, all
caught?
Of that stuff, right?
Right. So, do you think the people that might be listening to that speech, because it was not broadcast on Fox or any of the right-wing networks in any great length, if at all, do you think the people listening to it are already converted? Is he preaching to the converted? Or do people really understand the threat of authoritarianism coming out of the Trump campaign?
I think in some regard he is preaching to the choir, but there is an important distinction between sending a message and getting people to take an action. And I think that's what his speech was really about. And it's something as an online influencer I deal with all the time, because you don't want to just be going viral to no effect, right? I mean, my hope is that, like we saw Taylor Swift do, she was able to register tens of thousands of voters. So that caused people to take action, not just agree that it's good to vote or agree that democracy is important to protect, right? So we need that connection to happen more and more. And I think his commitment to hammering these points, and as he said in the speech, right? I mean, democracy doesn't end, and I'm going to misquote, but something like, democracies don't just end at the end of a rifle. They end when good people sit by and do nothing to some extent. So he's activating the base to actually go out and really commit as much as they can. I'm sure in terms of donations, but also in terms of going out, making sure they have a plan to vote, making sure they're telling their friends and having the conversations they need to have, that in a year we deliver another win.
Biden did mention the fact that Trump had suggested that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, deserved to be killed and the Department of Justice should be defunded. I mean, this is the language of a kind of terrorist dictator. This is not the language of a U.S. presidential candidate. And for Biden to call it out is basically saying, he's speaking the truth, but he's going outside of what typically you would do if it was a normal situation. You wouldn't necessarily quote things that the opponent had posted on Truth Social. But it's not a normal race, is it? I mean, and this is why the media shouldn't treat this as a normal two-horse political race.
Absolutely. And I think, to Biden's credit, he's obviously learned the lessons of 2016. I don't know that we can say the same for the media, but, I was on the Clinton campaign, so I'm constantly looking at the old speeches where it sounds like she is predicting the future. And I am sure that if Donald Trump were to win, you would watch this speech and feel like Joe Biden predicted the future, that moment where he called out Trump's authoritarian plan, if reelected, right, to take complete control of federal agencies, to get rid of nonpartisan civil servants and replace them with loyalists, right? All of those dangerous authoritarian behaviors need to be called out, and they need to be called out with a sense of urgency. And I will say, you mentioned sort of who was broadcasting this versus who was not broadcasting this. I think, Midas Touch, for example, shared this, and over 1 million people before this conversation, at least, viewed that. And I think what was interesting to me is I looked back and both CNN and MSNBC carried that entire speech. And I think two things about that. One, it proves that voters are interested in this stuff. That's why it does so well when a Midas Touch actually shows that information. And two, the healthy competition of responsible media focusing on the issues that people care about is prompting maybe some change in behavior from the cable network. So that's really positive to see, and I hope they keep it up over the year.
I agree with you. I mean, this is why I'm very proud to be part of this Midas Touch movement, because, this started as activism to really draw attention to the fact that the media was failing people by doing both sides journalism, or it's not even journalism, is it? It's just both sides reporting. And Midas Touch just basically puts the facts out there, and the facts speak for themselves. And if the fact is that the disgraced former president is calling for the death of General Mark Milley because he feels that he wasn't politically aligned with him, he's missed the entire point of this kind of separation of powers and how. In fact, let me quote Mark Milley, because he had his kind of retirement event at his relinquishment and retirement ceremony, as they call it, at Joint Base Maya Henderson Hall. And he said very, very explicit language about Donald Trump after being threatened with execution. He said, "We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion, and we don't take an oath to a king or queen or a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that is America, and that we're willing to die to protect it." I mean, he is referring to Donald Trump as a wannabe dictator. And this is the ex-Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, this is the highest level military person you can have. This is a constitutional crisis, as far as I see it. This really is the very top level of American politics in disarray when we're having to hear this type of rhetoric. And yet it barely gets any coverage by the media.
It's a puzzle, because you can argue, right, that Trump is so exciting and interesting, and that's why they disproportionately cover him. But what seems more, worth paying attention to, more dramatic, frankly, for better or worse, than what you just recounted, right? So it should generate coverage, which suggests maybe there's a different incentive that some of these companies have. But beyond that, yes, it's a crisis moment. Another thing Joe Biden pointed out that I think is important, and the media misses as well, is it's not just Trump, right? It's all the people supporting Trump. It's the loud silence of people who didn't speak out when a former president called for the execution of the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Insane. And there are hundreds of people in power across the country that are fully behind that effort. So really important that this is focused on not just the national level, but also this is happening all over the country at the local level, sometimes in even more extreme cases. So it's we have a constitutional crisis. We're in the middle of it, by the way. Same goes for, maybe it was a little silly when people were watching the sham Biden impeachment hearing last week, but there, viral moments, funny things, different Democrats did to point out the absurdity. But at the same time, that itself is absurd, that a president would be impeached, or, this hearing to sort of go after Biden is being weaponized. That's a very powerful constitutional tool that should be reserved for the most serious of occasions, as it was used on Trump.
I mean, I think with that, just to go off on a tangent for a second, but Trump's attitude is, well, I got impeached, so he should be impeached. I mean, they're treating impeachment like it's a badge of honor. And Trump doesn't want to be kind of singled out as the only president to be twice impeached in history, I guess. It's not good for his legacy.
Well, how about 4 times indicted? No, I think absolutely there's this sort of tit for tat behavior happening. I think, unfortunately, the clown car running this Republican Party couldn't even deliver their own impeachment hearing. It was kind of laughable. Their witnesses humiliated them. So that was just a funny thing to watch in some sense. But I think beyond that, the focus being on Biden's behaviors and Hunter Biden's behaviors is really a great opportunity, as we're seeing, to point out just how corrupt the Trump administration was, just what Ivanka Trump and all these, Trump adult children were doing, frankly, by the way, just held liable in New York State for fraud. So I think, the mirroring happening is probably not the fight Republicans thought it would play out to be. And we're seeing the same thing, by the way, with the attacks on Vice President Harris. I think, a couple weeks ago, it was very much they want to run against Vice President Harris. If you looked at the debate, you looked at, the recent messaging, they're not mentioning Kamala Harris too much anymore. So, I think they're really looking for how can they ruin this election like they did with the email story with Benghazi, and it's not coming together for them.
I want to talk about Kamala Harris in just a little while. Let's go back to this idea of these speeches, whether it be Joe Biden's speech or Mark Milley's retirement, or even the sham impeachment. The information silo is such that the people that you want to be seeing this stuff are not seeing it. So whilst Joe Biden's speech might be covered on CNN and MSNBC, it is not getting the kind of national coverage that it should do. And this is why I sometimes think that, the situation is so grave in terms of the fall of democracy and the rise of fascism, that actually Joe Biden's speeches should be done at the Resolute desk, from the Oval Office, looking down the barrel of the lens. We interrupt this program to bring you this important message from the president.
Oh my God, if only.
I mean, are things that serious? I mean, is that where he should be, how he should be presenting this information, just like cutting into broadcasts and telling people about the threat?
I think that might get some backlash, but I think your point about who we want to be speaking to and who he should be wanting to speak to is a good one, because I think there are a lot of people, sort of Democrats, that think, oh, it's so amazing to go on Fox News all the time and speak to an audience that's not going to hear my perspective. And I'm seeing more and more liberals go on there, by the way, and making this sort of argument. I think, it also has to do with competing in cable news and trying to get booked. It's better if you can go on the conservative network, all those types of things. But the point I have is, you're not winning over anyone. They're not winning over one person when they go on Fox News. They might go viral when they later share the clip owning whoever on social media. It's having zero impact on voters. But we know that 100 million Americans sat out the 2016 election. So why don't we go after those voters? And I think when you have this speech that Biden gave, calling out, again, sort of this subtler point that gets missed, that when you sit by, even if you agree that democracy is in crisis, when you sit by and do nothing, you are part of the problem causing us to lose this democracy. And I think it stems from a conversation that was so shut down in 2016 when Trump first came on the scene, where a lot of folks like myself, and I'm sure you, we're saying, let's not normalize these behaviors. Let's call it out all the time. And we were told we were overreacting. We were told the comparisons to history were inappropriate. Some even said offensive. And here we are, right, in this moment, years later. So we know what's at stake. And I think mobilizing the voters who are persuadable is such a better investment. It was upsetting, and I think a lot of people had a similar reaction. Senator Chris Murphy, who I'm a fan of, really made a big deal a couple of weeks ago about reading Hillbilly Elegy and going to Appalachia, a senator from Connecticut, right? Why are you doing that? Why are we still having the same sort of debunked conversation, really, from 2016, that it's this, economic anxiety situation happening? There's a strong segment of the country that is the basket of deplorables. They are racist. They are sexist. No matter what, they aren't going to vote for Democrats. Let it go. But there are a lot of hardworking Americans, by the way, in some of those same areas. I'm not saying dismiss that whole region of the country in any sense, but I'm saying let's not buy into false narratives that we think are going to persuade people who are never going to come over to our side.
It's a very good point, isn't it? That, there are some people who have such blind worship for Donald Trump, and they connect over the racism and the xenophobia and the hatred towards minorities. That's actually the reason they like him. And I think that the media forgets that actually you can be an evil, kind of nasty, racist homophobe, and you'll meet other evil, nasty, racist homophobes. And the tribal nature of humanity is such that people tend to stick to their own, even if it means voting against their own interests, because invariably a lot of the people who hold those views or want to vote for Trump are the ones that actually need democratic policy. Right? They will benefit from the taxation and the plans of the Democrats, not from Donald Trump.
And there's also a quieter version of that sort of archetype of, the sort of Trump voter who's out in, middle America and maybe working class. Look at the affirmative action case and how it brought out the racism of all these Ivy League educated elite conservatives who run the Wall Street Journal, who run sort of a whole bunch of media, really pointing out just how negative their view of any diversity and inclusion is. There was even a Wall Street Journal op-ed, right? Basically arguing that corporate America is suffering because one board hired a Black woman. It was insane. And mind you, if you actually go look, and this is an insane statistic, the recent Fortune 500 list, of those 500 CEOs, not one single Black woman CEO on that list. And yet somehow the pervasive narrative is DEI has gone too far. Wokeism has taken over corporate America. I mean, it's just not the case. And so we really have to share those facts and shut down false conversations.
I want to talk about a powerful, strong, powerful Black woman in just a moment. We'll come back and talk about Kamala Harris after this short break with our sponsor here on The Weekend Show. Heart health and staying healthy, especially when you have a family that you want to be able to spend as much time with as possible, is so important. We have a heartfelt reason to support our blood pressure. In fact, more than half the US population would benefit from blood pressure support. Well, Superbeats Heart Chews are an easy and convenient way to support healthy blood pressure, and they promote heart-healthy energy. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Superbeats are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. And with over 30,000 5-star reviews and counting, Superbeats Heart Chews are having their moment. Superbeats Heart Chews are incredibly delicious and so much better than any alternative supplements out there. I take my Superbeats Heart Chews each morning, and it's really kick-started my morning routine. After taking Superbeats Heart Chews, I feel like I have more energy and I'm ready to take on the day. Superbeats Heart Chews support healthy circulation, so you not only get blood pressure support, you also get productive, heart-healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Superbeats Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Superbeats Heart Chews and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeats.com and using promo code WEEKEND. That's superbeets.com, code WEEKEND. Rocket Money has saved me money by alerting me to subscriptions that I didn't even know I still had. Are your subscriptions draining your wallet? The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions, and they might not even remember subscribing to half of them. If you have no idea just how much you're spending each month, then you need Rocket Money. It's a great app that tracks all of your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going. There's subscriptions for everything these days, from streaming services to fitness programs, and sometimes it feels impossible to keep tabs on what you're paying for every month. That's why I'm such a huge fan of Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills, all in one place. With Rocket Money, you can easily cancel the ones you don't want with just the press of a button. No more long hold times or annoying emails with customer service. Rocket Money does all the work for you. It also lets you monitor all your expenses in one place. It recommends custom budgets based on past spending. They'll even send you notifications when you've reached your spending limits. With over 3 million users and counting, Rocket Money customers have saved an average of $720 each year. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/weekend. That's rocketmoney.com/weekend. We're back with Kaivan Shroff here on The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. Let's talk about the threat and fear of Kamala Harris. Now, if we work backwards, because I'm hearing this a lot, right? People are saying they don't want to vote for Joe because they don't think Joe will last the full term, and therefore they'll end up getting Kamala, and they don't want a female, and they certainly don't want a black female. This is the kind of worst instincts of a lot of embedded historical racism and just kind of hatred that is very much a part of some of the country's culture. Why do you think people are so scared of Kamala Harris?
And I think just to extend it, because we've been talking about racism from Republicans, racism that's really so deeply embedded, even a lot of Democrats I'm seeing are pushing really problematic, but also just plain dumb ideas and narratives around the vice president. So first of all, I think part of the power that she has that scares people so much is she did in 2022, she played a critical role turning out young voters and voters of color. And that coalition is the same coalition that did help Biden over the edge in 2020. So she's an absolutely invaluable member of not only the ticket, but the Democratic Party. Because I always say politics is a team sport. And what I don't like to see is there's a whole bunch of Democrats that I don't agree with everything they say and do. Some I don't even like that much at all. But if they are resonating with some part of our coalition, if they're getting a message out that maybe isn't a message intended for me, but for some other group, I'm all for it. And so what I don't like to see from the pundits and even people in our own party is to say, oh, she doesn't resonate with me. It's like, oh, well, are you a 50-year-old white guy? Because maybe then it's not for you. Maybe it is. There's a whole lot of 50-year-old white guys that love Kamala Harris. But I'm just saying, I mean, I saw an article in Politico. It was like, columnists suggest replacing Vice President Harris. All three columnists, you can't make this up, were white men over 40. Yeah. So again, it's whose ideas are pushed forward. Who is she not delivering for or resonating with? And then, of course, I think the clear evidence of the racism, just look back to our last vice president, right? I mean, Trump is an old, unhealthy man. I think, he's a heart attack away, really. Same thing for Pence, right? As they're arguing with Biden. And he accomplished not one thing. If anything, I guess on the way out, he one time performed his constitutional duty. Woohoo. But can anybody remember a single thing about Mike Pence? So why is it that Kamala Harris is held to this impossible standard, mind you, in a position that is not a forward-facing, take up all the attention position? And I always like to point out, right? I mean, there were 7 seasons of that show Veep, literally each and every episode premised on the fact that it sucks to be vice president. You're in the background. You're kind of carrying whatever you can, have to collect from the leadership. So I think I am seeing the Biden campaign put Kamala Harris front and center. I do think, by the way, she's an excellent person to lead that new gun violence prevention office. I was a litigation fellow at Everytown for Gun Safety. This is an idea that has been talked about for years and years and years. It's a huge accomplishment. And by the way, it's an accomplishment of young people and young leaders and a great reflection on Vice President Harris and Joe Biden that they listened and got it done. So that's one thing. I think also number 2, part of being a first, right, is that you have all this media coverage and buzz as the campaign is happening and as you're running and as you're elected. But then again, you go to being the vice president and suddenly you aren't getting those headlines. And suddenly everyone's like, oh, I was hearing all about Kamala Harris all the time. Where'd she go? And to compound it even further, because it is so many factors coming together to cause this, we also saw her when she was able to use her incredible prosecutorial skill set in those Senate hearings, destroying Bill Barr, destroying Brett Kavanaugh, right? And those were how a lot of people were introduced to her originally, and they want to see more of that. And by the way, that skill set goes perfectly with a campaign mode, so we're going to see more and more of that. She's perfect for that, but there's only so many appropriate moments for her to be giving moments like that. By the way, her going down to Florida and whooping DeSantis, critical example of that.
I would also say that because she has the deciding vote in the Senate, she's had to be kind of chained to Washington. This is part of the problem, isn't it? That her vote has been an essential vote for so many things.
History making. She's done it the most times.
Right. But that also means that she can't really leave, They're like, why isn't she at the southern border? Well, because she's having to vote in Washington all the time.
It's a little bit of both. That's part of it. I do think, on the other side of the coin, part of being the VP is it is a little easier to move the VP around pretty quickly. And so that's why I think we saw her, she was immediately in Tennessee when they tried to expel young black lawmakers for daring to speak out about gun violence. And that was another moment where I couldn't think of a better person, a better politician in the country that could have showed up there and directed international attention to that, again, crisis in our democracy. So I think people see what a valuable player she is. And what's so interesting, just given that recent GOP debate where you now have a Tim Scott, you have a Nikki Haley, you have a Vivek Ramaswamy sort of serving as these token shields to gaslight the American public about the racism and the sexism in the Republican Party. You have Kamala Harris on the other side, who's actually, a true representative delivering on the issues that matter to the communities that she represents. And part of that is because of her lived experience. One thing I hate about the criticism of Vice President Harris, because it's so clearly rooted in being a minority and a woman, is the criticism over her laugh. Because I think you have to imagine, as Attorney General, as a senator, before that she was a DA, and then as the first vice president, how many rooms do you think Kamala Harris has been in where she's the only woman and the only Black woman? And it's sort of this reaction I think a lot of people of color and women understand. When somebody says something ignorant or stupid to you, you kind of just you can't make every conversation about that. You kind of just have to laugh and move on and get your point out. And it's also a way to sort of, fight against this, again, racist, sexist idea of the angry Black woman, where in a lot of rooms, when she just makes a point, people are going to perceive it a certain way. And so, starting off with that laugh or, a smile, unfortunately, sometimes does help reduce that effect. So I think, again, imagine if media was writing about this in an informative way, but instead, of course, they just perpetuate the ignorance.
Yeah, I can see that. And we never talk about the kind of social graces, as well as the need, especially for Black and brown people, to manage insensitive and racist white people and to laugh something off. I can completely see how that becomes part of your armory. If you're an intelligent Black woman who is often probably in the company of white men who are not happy about it. And this is the problem. I've said a few times in recent years, and I'm really very pleased that it is kind of powerful and smart Black women that are indicting Donald Trump. This really is like him getting his just desserts, having been a kind of lifelong racist and a misogynist, to have strong Black women who are the ones that are bringing him onto the stand, into the courtroom. And he must hate that. I mean, I think, I've seen in interviews where he said, it's not right. It shouldn't be like this. And you're not quite sure what he's talking about. Once you realize that it's racist, what he's saying, that Black people should not be arresting white people, that goes back to Jim Crow. I mean, that is the stuff of a previous generation. And yet that is the way he thinks. That's the way he sees it.
And I think to take it even a level further, yes, it's inspiring to see Black women, holding Trump accountable, and really the power of diversity at play, because how many white men in positions of power at the DOJ on both sides, both sides of the aisle, didn't take action, passed the buck, said, we don't want to come across too political or too partisan, or, we want to promote an actively partisan Republican agenda, even though it's supposed to be independent. I think there's countless examples of that around the country. And so it's not random that it is these Black women who decided to charge ahead despite great personal toll. And I know, Fani Willis has certainly spoken about the backlash she's received, the threats she's received. And I'm sure that's true of every single
all of
one
them.
of them.
I mean, Tanya Chutkan, her life was threatened. Someone kind of showed up at the house. And, this is the thing, isn't it? That unfortunately, he's used reverse racism to kind of claim that it's racist, that these Black people are being racist towards him as a white man. I mean, to say that stuff out loud, you have to be pretty racist to be able to even form that argument in your mind. And
by the way, just to stand by somebody that explicitly, blatantly racist, no matter what reason you cite, does implicate you in that racism, in that sexism, in that political violence. And it's not just theoretical, right? Because I think sometimes we think, threats, and all these people on social media are giving threats. Some people give me threats. But Judge Salas's son, Judge Esther Salas's son, was shot by a Trump supporter who was angry and incited by the Republican rhetoric. And that is real. That is not tweeting something on social media. It starts with the tweets on social media, but that's how it ends. And I think that gets lost because it's almost this irony of, sort of the really honest person, and just as a comparison, right? The honest person that tells the truth 99% of the time, the 1% of the time they're fact checked is going to really stand out, and they're going to cover it for months and keep talking about it. Whereas people that lie every single day don't get held to that same standard somehow. And it's kind of treated like nothing. And the same is true of these threats.
And the white people, they don't recognize that what they're saying can bring about hate crime. And even if they do, they probably don't care because they're racist in the first place. And
maybe they want to see it even.
They want to see it. They want to see it. And we saw it with, so many examples. George Floyd, obviously. But there's so many examples of situations where the parents of deceased black people refer to the attack as a lynching, as a public lynching. And this is the thing that makes me so sad, is that people have very short memories about the history of racism in the US, or white people do. Not a single black or brown person has a short memory about it because to them, it is so prevalent, even today.
Well, and I think, right, just taking that example of the racism, the anti-lynching bill wasn't passed until last term.
Yeah.
What does that say? I mean, it took till 2020, around then, to pass the federal Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. And yet you have a governor in Florida who at one point was considered a front runner for the GOP primary, saying that slavery had benefits. So it's really just, I don't think even 10 years ago, if you told people these would be the national debates and conversations that have been pushed. And by the way, again, Kamala Harris saying slavery is not something we are going to debate, period. Who else in government could have said something like that effectively and powerfully, and marshal the energy around this ridiculous, really, really moment in our time?
And I suppose all of the criticism of Kamala Harris, aside from the frustration of being the VP because you're always playing second fiddle to the president, aside from that, all the criticism has come invariably from white men, the elite, and we really shouldn't underestimate how much of the mainstream media is controlled by wealthy white people, and that is why most media is skewed, and people don't want to upset the status quo. They don't want to expose the truth about what's happening in society because it could compromise their own jobs. So they're actually best to kind of just keep a distance on those types of subjects.
And I think, right, think about what it takes. It is an objectively stupid proposal to swap out Vice President Harris in this moment in time. First of all, it's just not really done. I mean, has it ever been done? Yes, but it's not really done. It's certainly not done when the vice president has done at least an above average job, which I think most people agree with. I mean, she's certainly a higher profile, more impactful VP than most, despite being criticized. And it just shows such a fundamental misunderstanding of the Democratic Party base, which is Black women, Black voters, young voters, the exact demographics she speaks to, that you would suggest it. So the fact that you're willing to honestly put out something so stupid really suggests kind of such a sort of momentum for that and such a incentive that is obviously behind that doesn't really add up logically. So I do think you're absolutely right there.
I want to talk about the Democratic strategy going forward because, we actually spoke before about how easy it is to brand the right and the far right, their rules and on abortion and on migration and education. It's very kind of cut and dry, this kind of Christian nationalist idea that, everybody should be ideally white and Christian and a nationalist. But the Democrats are much harder to brand, aren't they? Because of the nuanced thinking, the range of views, also the range of the representation. It's like anybody who's not in the Republican Party falls underneath the Democrats. And so it's much harder to kind of gather the kind of get a national consensus from so many different types of thinking. But I was thinking about how you could do this, and you could have a slogan, and maybe it's been done before. Maybe my knowledge of American political history kind of prevents me from having access to this. But the idea of live and let live, of people on the left, progressives, Democrats, liberals, whatever you want to call them, just saying, do whatever you want to do. Just don't force me to do it. That notion is something that I personally think that the Democratic National Committee could actually make more of.
I wonder, my initial reaction to that is a lot of people want to do bad stuff. So I think it's a little too optimistic. I mean, we do have to actually stop the active acts of racism and sexism and violence happening, largely promoted by this bigoted group of MAGA people that Biden called out in the speech last week. I do think, though, your point on messaging is correct. It's a twofold problem. I do think part of it is some Democrats aren't good communicators. They're not. And I think, by the way, no offense to Gavin Newsom, I do think he's very strong at what he does. He's not like the most amazing person ever to speak on cable news. It's just that the expectations are so low that when he goes on,
he's not as likable as
he goes on. He looks great. He's ready to answer the question. Yeah. He is prepared. All of that stuff. Good on him. Keep doing it. He was awesome at the response to the GOP debate, not knocking it at all. But it's actually, I think, a little bit more of a comment on who's doing it wrong, because even just, there was sort of some buzz within the party about people that were going on CNN, just directly asked the question, should Kamala Harris be the VP? Gavin Newsom knocked that answer out of the park. Other people tripping over themselves despite very clearly agreeing that yes, she should be. I mean, saying all these things. I mean, just speak directly and clearly, communicate effectively. This is not hard to do. And that is part of the problem generationally. I do think it's a generational disconnect on that issue. But the other part of the problem is that Democrats are actually trying to do stuff and trying to get things done and have to put out actual policies and plans and talk about how they're going to drive those policies and plans through. Republicans don't suffer from that problem because they have no policies and plans to offer. So all they have is talking points and Fox News hits. And that's all they care about. And by the way, they can make money off that stuff we've seen, right? I mean, just Trump is enriching himself from these crimes that he's committed. So I think it's just two very different goals that are achieved through different means.
And part of the problem with the live and let live thinking is that it actually doesn't really apply beyond things like abortion and LGBTQ plus issues, for example, right? Because Democrats are like, if you need to access healthcare as a woman, then access healthcare because that's your right. If you want to love who you want to love and marry who you want to marry, you do that. That's your right. However, Democrats also advocate for collective responsibility. So if there's a pandemic, then please wear a mask. Please get vaccinated. Not necessarily mandated outside of federal workers, but rules are necessary for a functioning government.
Well, and rules are necessary and laws are necessary to correct the historic wrongs of America. And I liked that, again, we're talking about this speech a lot, but I think it was a historic speech and it's going to play out really well in the future. Biden wasn't shy to say, America isn't perfect. We have had all these problems in our past. But he didn't stay on a negative note. He said, and I believe that we can, achieve more than ever, overcome that as we have tried to in the past and on and on and on. But the fact is, we need laws because it's not live and let live if you're an admissions officer, white admissions officer, and you only want to, admit people that look like you. It's not live and let live if, you're a corporate employer, as we just pointed out, right? All these sort of non-diverse CEOs running these companies, and you only want to hire people that look like you. That has real consequences for the country based on systemic discrimination and bad policies of the past. So we, I think, do have the burden to do more.
And that is the fundamental problem with marketing the Democrat ethos, isn't it? That it is so nuanced and there is so much work to do. I mean, as we know, Democrats do all the work, then Republicans get voted in, then they try and undo everything. And then so the cycle continues. The Republicans rack up more debt, and then the Democrats have to get us out of the debt, and then the cycle continues. And this, the problem with this is it makes the Democrats' job harder and harder every time they actually get control of the House or houses, because there is more work to do.
And I think, though, also part of the messaging problem is, again, a miscalibration of which voters to prioritize. Because, right, when you hear Bernie Sanders, and by the way, this is my opinion, Bernie Sanders lost in 2016 and he lost again in 2020, because when Bernie Sanders talks about the voters that matter, when Bernie Sanders talks about the working class, he only means the white working class. And he keeps repeating this mantra and this lie that Democrats need to win over the working class. If you keep saying that, you are really defining the working class in a very narrow and problematic way. And I think what I liked about Biden calling out Trump by name, calling out MAGA by name, shows that I think they are coming around to this idea that we need to speak plain about what's happening to the people, to the middle, and to the people that already support us, because they really need to understand what's at stake here. And I need to do it in a punchier way than sort of reciting my, economic accomplishments, as great as they are. Going through a list of policies is never going to be as effective as framing, the existential crisis that we're in as what it is. And so we should do that more and more. By the way, I do think the Democrats aren't good at messaging angle. We've been talking this whole time about the role corporate media plays. There's only so much messaging you can do, right? I mean, on the anniversary, just a great example, the anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, which in fairness to media, they widely credited as successful. They said, hey, look at this. This really worked. It's an example of how good policy actually leads to good outcomes. Not one, I think, major network carried Biden's speech touting that accomplishment, and yet you had the pundits on the same network, remember Mehdi Hassan and Chris Hayes and a few others, right, tweeting out, oh, this is why Democrats suck at messaging. They don't talk about this stuff. It's like your network literally cut away from the speech he was giving talking about this. So, I think it's a no-win situation for Democrats when that's the reality. But we do have great messengers. Gavin Newsom's a great messenger for some people. AOC is a great messenger for other people. People like, myself are messengers for a different group of people. And there's lots of people like me doing this type of work, getting the message out to people that want to hear it on social media and on TikTok. But that's not everyone. And I think the way that the White House communicates does sort of get the point across to, my parents' generation. And I'm glad to see them being innovative and launching that. I think they launched, a couple of weeks ago, this Biden HQ account. And I don't know if you came across it, but being a little bit more engaging, a little more real time, tweeting GIFs and funny jokes that maybe you wouldn't expect from, the Joe Biden account. So I think they're coming around to it in a powerful way.
Okay. I want to talk about Joe Biden's climate call in just a minute. We'll take another quick break and then come back with more from Kaivan Shroff. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Using silver-infused fabrics originally inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WEEKEND at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend and use the code WEEKEND to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. That's trymiracle.com/weekend to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. I've always found it difficult to find clothes that I like to wear, and when I find one thing that works, I just buy loads of them and just wear the same thing all the time. Well, men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion. The commuter collection offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, zips, and polos. You'll never have to worry about what to wear when you've got the Rhone commuter collection. The comfortable 4-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work or your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. And with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I personally love a technical fabric, something that is advanced and uses technology to make a more comfortable and more modern outfit. Now, the commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So head to rhone.com/Anthony and use promo code Anthony to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to rhone.com/Anthony and use code Anthony, ANTHONY. It's time to find your corner office comfort. We're back on the weekend show. I'm Anthony Davis. Kaivan Shroff, the climate crisis, climate change, green policies, all of these things are political suicide right now for Joe Biden leading into the 2024 election. He has to get things done behind the scenes, but it's very difficult to kind of talk about it out loud because so many people in the US, and I include some Democrats too, they haven't quite got their head around the fact that the carbon emissions are caused by humans since the Industrial Revolution are the reason why we have extreme weather events and why the planet is heating up at such a rate. And if you look at the graph of the Industrial Revolution kicking in and seeing what climate emissions, what carbon emissions look like, you'll see that it tallies exactly with the temperature of the planet. So it's not in question scientifically. And the rest of the world has moved on and is building for, these events, trying to reduce. I mean, the UK, where I'm from, they are hoping to be carbon neutral at some point in the next 15 to 20 years. I mean, that is incredible, really, considering the US is so far behind. Some places like Costa Rica are already carbon neutral. Climate Corps is this new initiative that Biden has announced. It was announced relatively quietly. And this is kind of reminiscent of the New Deal. Biden authorized the creation of the American Climate Corps through an executive order to hire 20,000 young people in its first year, putting them to work installing wind and solar projects, making homes more energy efficient, restoring ecosystems like coastal wetlands to protect towns from flooding. I mean, it's a brilliant idea, but it's kind of been done on the quiet. Would you agree?
I think it's been done strategically. You could call it quiet compared to national messaging and a huge speech about it. But I think part of the brilliance of the rollout, right, is the people that care so much about this issue, largely young voters too, know about it, right? I mean, I don't think anyone that's so passionate about the climate missed this. So I think, it's smart to kind of, do these policies, actually carry out these promises and make sure that the voters that care about those issues hear about it, but maybe not the ones that are going to be turned off. Yeah. At the same time, I think Biden stood behind his approach on climate change. I think he's demonstrated, which I think this is a great quality that a lot of leaders misunderstand, and something Biden's done again and again and again. Frankly, even in choosing Vice President Harris, who criticized him, as his vice president is he's good at listening and changing course when he gets feedback. So, right, he responded to young climate protesters on Willow. He's taken action to launch this climate corps. He listened similarly on gun violence. That gun violence office, I think, was announced in, close proximity to this. So those things taken together, I think, show young voters who might be frustrated with whatever the Supreme Court's decision stalling loan forgiveness, or who might feel that, just the country itself is in crisis and what should I do? Should I even participate? It's enough, I think, to show them that we have a leader who's listening to them, valuing what they care about, the issues that affect their daily lives, and responding.
The US is the second biggest polluter on the planet after China. You and everybody, including Antonio Guterres at the UN, says this is an existential threat to humanity. There'll be huge climate migration. There'll be places will be too hot to live in or too cold to live in. I mean, the normalcy of weather is going to change significantly as a result of human-caused climate change. And yet, there is another existential threat in the US, and that is Trumpism and fascism. And so I guess the problem is you have to choose, right? Well, what can we deal with first and quicker? Do you think that's the reason that Biden has kind of done it in this order?
I think it's a both and, I don't think we have to sacrifice work on climate change while we're explaining to people that democracy is, in great peril. I think the second issue of climate change is also a global leadership effort. Certainly the US is, an outlier in terms of its contribution, but I think there is a lot of global leadership on this issue. There are other countries taking the charge. And what Joe Biden can do is, at least voice our commitment to doing better. At the same time, with the climate issue, my personal opinion, again, is that there are issues that are more important to voters, to some voters. Whether or not they should be is a different conversation, but there are Americans who can't put food on the table. And there are Americans who, are living paycheck to paycheck, and they're not going to buy arguments in favor of spending on climate change instead of focusing on those issues.
But they're not going to have a table to put the food on. That's the problem, isn't it? It's like the very planet that we walk upon is burning. And yet, because economic issues are so bad, as in wages have not kept up with inflation over time and people can't afford to live, that prevents us from doing our collective responsibility and our duty to actually look after the only place we have to live, which is Earth.
Well, and it's another communication issue where, climate change is an economic issue, so it shouldn't be viewed as a trade-off. And by the way, in lower income, lower socioeconomic communities is where the impacts of climate change are most felt and most immediately felt. And those communities will be affected and destroyed by climate change. So I think conveying that message in economic terms is much more important than sort of repeating whatever's already been said about, from the scientists and this type of thing. That's important for some group. It's not coming across to a whole lot of people. Now, I do think as we experience in real time the weather events that we've been talking about for decades, and I think this summer was a really jam-packed example of it across the country, some people are coming around and understanding that it's disruptive to their daily lives too. It's here in their face now, and it is going to stop them from going to work. It is going to stop their kids from going to school. It's going to stop their town from even existing, perhaps. So I think hopefully that urgency is coming through clearly. At the same time, the president has to focus on the issues at this point that can help him get reelected. So I'm all for Democrats saying what's popular, what's true, but what's popular and what's going to get us over the line. Because if you lose, if you don't have power, you can't do any of this stuff. So
and remember that if Trump was to win, which he could, thanks to the system, the Electoral College favoring Republican candidates and gerrymandering and redrawing of districts and propaganda, misinformation, the Kremlin. There's all sorts of reasons that could contribute to a Trump win, provided he's not, of course, in prison, but he could still run from prison.
Maybe not.
But Trump doesn't believe in climate change. He doesn't know what it is. He gutted the Environmental Protection Agency. He has no interest in it. He wants to open more oil facilities. He always boasts about how much oil there is under our feet that is untapped. I mean, that's effectively winding the country back decades, but it's also setting fire to the rest of the planet as well.
And again, not just Trump, right? The entire leadership of the Republican Party, even Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, I think he explicitly said, you should go live a high carbon lifestyle. Like, let's actively make things worse. So it's certainly an urgent crisis. I do think, though, especially it overlaps with another issue, which is representation of younger voices in politics across the country. There was even a climate change question at the first Republican debate, which I think surprised people coming from a young person. And so that itself, I think, is one data point that they had a young Republican ask that at that debate on the national stage. So there is sort of this buildup happening. And I think people are understanding that the next generations will be, as they've been told forever, inheriting this crisis. And largely, unfortunately, it's going to be on us to deal with it and manage it. And hopefully, if Joe Biden's elected to another term, we will, make great advancements instead of sort of, correcting the bad policies that have been implemented by the last administration.
But Democrats need to win all three branches of government in order to do this, to get the consensus, to be able to get the votes, don't they? Do you think that, I mean, just to throw some predictions out there, I know we try not to do that too often, but in this case, there's so many schools of thought as to the way the 2024 election could go, right? And I am saying in my reporting at the moment that Trump can win. And I'm repeating that because I think that is a reality, and that is something that you shouldn't get complacent about, that Trump's win is going to change the face of America as we know it. And at the beginning, you kind of explained how that would happen, just crashing and burning the entire system and rebuilding it in his image. So obviously there's that. But obviously Joe Biden being 80, that is a problem for some people. They can't see past his age. They can't see past his gaffes as described by right-wing media, because he doesn't really make many gaffes, but they tend to clip them and repeat them and claim that he has dementia when he clearly doesn't. This is a problem, isn't it?
Let's talk about the age question, because as a political commentator, this is the number one question I get asked in interviews. And first of all,
that's why I saved it for last, incidentally.
It's a fair question, but it's definitely the one I get asked the most. We talk about Joe Biden's age. Donald Trump is a 77-year-old man who we're told drinks 6 Diet Cokes a day, eats a Big Mac every day, doesn't do any real exercise, is under 4 indictments in multiple jurisdictions, right? I mean, this guy is just as old as 80-year-old Joe Biden, who bikes and does Pilates and eats healthy. So first of all, I think the age issue in terms of Trump versus Biden is silly, and we should let that go. Now, in terms of older politicians in general, I think we need to have a more sophisticated conversation. People like me, I mean, my 96-year-old grandmother wakes up every day and goes to work still. She's a fashion designer. And she does that because it keeps her mind sharp and it keeps her engaged with the world. And I think so many young people have grown up with older people they can point to that are similar, that they've seen age really well and, stay sharp and stay involved and stay leading. So I actually think, somewhat ironically, the younger generations have less of a sort of dismissive bias just because of somebody's age. Now, that doesn't mean that our generation doesn't want to hold, the bad actors of the old generation who haven't woken up and haven't come around and perpetuate the toxic behaviors of Me Too that have been really unpacked, I think, well. We don't want those people in power anymore. But that doesn't mean no older people can be in power. And I think when you see somebody like a Nancy Pelosi, and you compare that to a Mitch McConnell, it's night and day. So we shouldn't be saying both of those people have to get out because they're old. Some people can have that opinion. Reasonable people can disagree. But Mitch McConnell can't get through a press conference. Nancy Pelosi defended the Republic at age 80. So, right, these are differences. And I think the Pelosi example is just so great to me because if you remember, in 2018, Seth Moulton and a couple other Democrats were igniting that charge that we need new leadership. It's time for new leadership. They couldn't actually articulate why we needed new leadership. They couldn't articulate what they would bring to the table as younger leaders. By the way, I think that's valid to do if you can do it. They couldn't do it. So instead, we had Pelosi as speaker again. And imagine the state of our democracy if we didn't have that. right?
But is it right that Pelosi should announce that she's running again? I mean, because, I totally respect and appreciate all of her skills and successes, and she still has a lot to offer. But there is an ego involved. She said she wanted, because she has announced that she will be running again. She says she's doing it because she wants to stick it to Donald Trump. I mean, which is very amusing, and I totally get it. But look at some of the younger characters that are coming through, and look at how you need to make room for these people. And that would be what I would do. I would say, I'm going to mentor people. I'll still be here, but I'm not going to be in elected office. Do you think that would have been a better decision?
No, I think that unfortunately the state of politics today is that money is essential. You got to raise money to win. You have to. And I don't think everyone has to agree that that is a good thing, but it's a real thing. And so there's very few people on the planet that can fundraise like Nancy Pelosi. I think every Democratic official I've talked to about this, candidates across the board, are very happy that she's running for re-election, because she can't fundraise in the same capacity if she's, that backseat advisor that you sort of suggest. And in terms of making room, there is room. That's, I think, one of the missing pieces of this conversation is it's not all old people or all young people. There's one Gen Z member of Congress. Let's have more than that. And yeah, there's a whole lot of really terrible older folks. So let's move them out because they haven't come around. They're not right for the moment. And so I think that's the conversation to have. And by the way, I mean, that experience and that institutional leadership, again, rightly or wrongly, practically matters. And we've seen that with Joe Biden, who, again, has those decades-long relationships.
Well, the legacy aspect of leadership, I guess, isn't it? Because when Joe Biden showed up at the United Auto Workers Union a couple of weeks ago, they were thrilled. They were heaping praise on him. That was an historic appearance on the picket line in Michigan. If it had been a younger person, AOC, for example, it wouldn't have had the same impact of him now being Union Joe with one of the biggest shows of support for the labor movement in American history. I mean, so from that perspective, I get it.
And people ask, right, how does Biden connect with young people? Well, young people really care about class solidarity, and they really care about the future of work that we'll be inheriting that's, less equal than ever, and the problems of digitization. So yeah, it's really powerful when you have 80-year-old Joe Biden show up there, not only to make history, and then you have AOC, part of our coalition, saying it's a historic event, energizing the young voters in that regard too. So I think it's a formula that works. But again, we shouldn't just throw experience and institutional knowledge out the window only because for the recent decades, we've overlooked the powerful and impactful voices of younger people, which I'm obviously all for. I just think it's, it gets boiled down into this sort of silliness of, okay, I just saw today, everyone over 65 that stays in office is terrible, and sort of criticism of, obviously the late Dianne Feinstein. So just, again, I'd point to her as an example. Yeah, somebody that maybe stayed in way too long, but that doesn't mean that everybody that's older that stays in shouldn't be there.
We actually had a huge influx of young politicians in the UK coming through a few years ago, and they only did one term because they realized it was so corrupt and that there was so little they could do because of the nature of the corruption that they actually did not run for re-election. Or some of them quit or, kind of disappeared in a terrible schmelting accident. And yet, here, I would say that the corruption is such that you actually need people like Nancy Pelosi to navigate the corruption. Because for younger people coming in, it is so shell-shocking to kind of be amongst this, Capitol Hill is a toxic place in many ways. And Pelosi knows how to play the game, doesn't she?
Better than I think anyone else. And by the way, you point out, right, that level of corruption. Yes, younger people elected will be vulnerable to that. But I think we've also seen when you have these lifetime appointments, right, at the Supreme Court, sort of it goes both ways. There's that argument that, term limits in Congress would open people up to be more vulnerable to corruption because they're new, and whoever they meet that gives them a speech or give them money, they're going to want to listen to. They don't have anything to stand on. At the same time, we've learned it sounds like if you buy, Justice Clarence Thomas, you got him bought for life. Whereas if you have some rotation, hopefully there's some level of, less of that capture.
Yeah.
So definitely an interesting debate to be had on the future of those institutions when it comes to term limits and age.
Okay. We have to finish. Time is upon us, but I'm thrilled that we got a chance to talk again. Kaivan Shroff, thank you for joining the weekend show.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. The 5 Minute News daily podcast drops every morning. You can hear me tell you what's going on around the world while you make a coffee. And do join me next week with a brand new special guest and 3 more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.